We've made some tweaks to the pre-game duties, so part 5 will cover those. There are some checklists in chapter 4 of the mechanics manual. Again, I think this is a chapter that people don't look at as often as perhaps they should. There are different checklists. The first one is the before the day checklist, the things that you typically sort out in the few days before the game. So one of those is to establish what colour uniform each team will be wearing. And if you discover that both teams are going to be wearing the same colour uniform, then might be the time to ask them to do something about it. It's also worthwhile doing a little bit of research if you don't know who the head coach of each team is, so that you know who to talk to during the game. It's also useful to know whether anybody from either team is suspended for the game, because that's a topic that might arise when you arrive at the ground. You should also make sure you've got the contact details for other members of the crew. If you're working with people that you regularly work with, then you'll usually have that already. But if you're working with people you've not worked with before, then you may want to add their phone number into your contact list, their email address, things like that. And then, of course, these days, because we're becoming more and more reliant on radios and other electronic equipment, make sure that you fully charge it. The second checklist is the game management checklist. These are the things that you talk to game management about when you arrive at the ground. And again, that's a time just to check that both teams have got appropriate jersey colours with them. And if you do that early enough, it leaves the prospect that there will be time for them to fix it. And then the team checklist, this is the things you talk to the head coach about, typically about an hour before kickoff. You can mention to them what the procedure is for calling a timeout or a coach's conference. I'm sure many of you already do that. When we added that to the list, it was because video review was already on the list. So if we're telling them how to do a video review, at the very least, we should be telling them how to call a timeout or a coach's conference. Duties before the game on the field. We've added a useful table in section 8.2.5 that summarises who's responsible for what. In preparing this presentation, I noticed actually there was a mistake in the table. So if you've got a version of the 18th edition prior to release 18.5 and BAFRA members, your printed version is release 18.4, so this mistake will be in your book. Please go to 8.2.5, find the table. In the row that's labelled Ensure Game Balls are available, in column 6D, that should be S for side judge, not F for field judge. And if you want to know why, paragraph 8.2.12ai says that this is the side judge's responsibility. I just got that wrong when we did the table in the first place, but it's now fixed. If you've got release 18.5 or later, or you've downloaded the latest version of the mechanics manual from the IAFOA website, then you will have a version that has this error corrected. A couple of changes of duties for the back judge. We now want the back judge to be the one who ensures that the game balls are available. And also, the back judge should be the one that checks the medical personnel. Previously, these were duties that were performed by the timekeeper, and that rather overloaded them. If you don't have a back judge, because, say, you're a four-man crew, then the line judge has to do it. If you're a 6-man crew with a side judge, then the side judge does it. Both those jobs, checking, ensuring the game balls are available and checking that the medical personnel where they are and briefing them. Now, the timekeeper is, whether it's the line judge or the field judge, checks the announcer and the clock operator, if you have one. And the other, if you have both, briefs the ball boys and the alternate crew. Now, if you're a 5-man crew or smaller, then the line judge is going to do all of these things, but usually the ball boys will be the only one you have to do. The other things are much less likely to actually be available. We've revamped the section on ceremonies. This is in chapter 8.3. So by ceremonies, we mean where you've got a pre-game national anthems, introducing the teams, a minute's silence or something like that. These things tend to take place before the coin toss, though occasionally they take place after. And mechanics-wise, what we're saying is try and be consistent. So we've noticed, particularly at international games where they're played in a tournament, sometimes different crews at the tournament will have different ceremony mechanics. If you're doing a tournament or a series of games, please ensure that you're going to do things consistently. The most important principle of all this is to keep the players in sight at all times during the ceremony. Don't turn your back on them. Don't have one team in front of you and one team behind you. Turn 90 degrees so they're both to the side of you, if that's the case. Now, the preferred lineup is for the teams to be in their team areas. And if I know around Europe there's a habit of lining up in the middle of the field, like happens in soccer games and rugby matches. But remember, when you see the coin toss for the Super Bowl, the teams are back in their team area. That's the preferred place. And this is one case where we can perhaps learn from the Americans. So if that's the case, if both teams are in the team area, then the officials should line up along one of the 20-yard lines and choose your 20-yard line carefully. If there are flags down at one end of the stadium, or if the teams are going to enter the field from that end of the stadium, then go to the far 20-yard line so that you're facing in that direction. Or failing that, if all things are equal, then just go to the 20-yard line that is to the right, looking down from the press box. But if your hosts do ask for the teams to line up together in the middle of the field, then face the same way as them and watch them out the corner of your eye. The officials should always be in single file abreast, with the referee in or as near the middle as they can get. Then when you go back to the sideline for the coin toss ceremony, previously we said we would like one official on each 30-yard line, but we realised that if that official was on the 25-yard line, then they could observe the whole of the team area on their side of the field from that position. So the place to be is on the 25-yard line rather than the 30-yard line.